Hello, hello, and welcome to the first part of the two-part achievements for ancient China. We are going to look at some of the most common achievements that came out of ancient China, what made China so remarkable, and we're going to end with talking about the Great Wall. That'll be in our second part of our video, but we're going to start today with just some basic achievements. I say basic, but they're anything but. They played a huge part in China and the world that we live in today. A lot of the things that we have today we wouldn't have without these inventions that came out of ancient China. Same thing we talked about with ancient Mesopotamia. So again, I'm on my iPad with my stylus, so you'll see me looking down quite a bit, trying to find a way to do that less so you don't look at the side of my face a lot, but I'm working on it. So as we continue doing this for who knows how long, hopefully it'll get better. But we're going to look at ancient China achievements. So we are looking at ancient China. The ancient Chinese were technologically advanced. Oops, I don't have my pen on. Come on, Miss Bosnango, get it together. Were technologically, oh, I'm going to run out of room. I'm going to squeeze it down here. Advanced. And were credited with many important inventions and engineering, that's an I, feats. Sorry, I didn't make the lines quite long enough for myself. So the ancient Chinese were very technologically advanced. They have lots of different things that came out of China that has really shaped the world that we live in today. Things, like I said already, that we wouldn't have without the ancient Chinese. One of those things being the Great Wall of China, which we'll get to here later. So let's talk about the big one. Let's talk about silk. So silk, if you've ever touched silk before, hopefully you've had a chance. If you haven't, that's okay too. But silk is a very soft, light material, and it's made, if you don't know this already, it's made from the cocoons of silkworms. No, I don't know how it works. You could probably Google it if you really wanted to know. But it's made from the cocoons of silkworms. It's a very valuable export. So if you remember when we talked about imports and exports, exports leave the country, they exit the country. So the Chinese would send silk out. I don't know if they still do or not. I'd assume they probably would. But silkworms are very common there. So from the cocoons of these silkworms, we get silk. Very valuable export. And this silk led to a huge boom in trading in China. Okay, it led to the creation of the Silk Road. So the Silk Road, I'm going to flip over, see if it'll let me do this on the smaller side here. The Silk Road is a oops, my pen's not on. Darn it, Miss Wozniak. Is a 4,000 mile long trade and travel route. Oh, look at that, I made it fit. Boom! It's a 4,000 mile long trade and travel route that helped the Chinese dynasties grow tremendously. And I have a picture here that I'm going to show you. This trade route, you're going to talk about it again in 7th grade, so I don't want to give too much information away too early, but this trade route was established. It wasn't just trade, it was for travel as well, but it allowed why can I not move this? It allowed the transportation of, what is happening? Why can't I move this? It allowed the transportation of different goods and services across this. Now remember, we don't have cars or planes or anything along those lines, so we really have to what is happening? Hold on, I gotta figure out why I can't move this. Just a second. There we go. That was weird. I don't know why it was doing that. I fixed it. So it made for the trading of goods and services. If you look at this map here, the red is the land, gosh, I'm struggling today. Land routes. and the blue is the water routes. So we see this was not just a land thing, it was it was a literal road, but it also was like boats and stuff. But it allowed for trading in China, India, Persia, Arabia, all along Somalia and Africa, in Egypt, Europe, the Mediterranean Sea. Like I said, you're going to talk about this again in 7th grade, so I don't want to go too far into depth right now. But I wanted to make sure I introduced it to you because it was a huge thing that came out of ancient China. Huge thing that came out of ancient China. Let's talk about paper and writing. So paper was invented. We talk about paper here, the paper that we write on today, the paper that I'm currently reading from my notes, right? This paper was invented in China, so you can think Chinese for all of your homework. So the paper was invented by the Chinese in the 2nd century. And the Chinese developed written language that began as pictures. This is a lot like when we talked about cuneiform in Mesopotamia. It started out as pictures and eventually formed into the characters that we know of today. Now, the language of Chinese the written language has so many characters to it. It is insane. Actually, today, there are about 50,000 characters. To give you a perspective, we have 26. We have 26 letters, what they would consider characters. They have 50,000 that exist in Chinese writing. This is like, I've talked about it before in my classes, where I had a student or a exchange student that came over from South Korea. And when she wrote my name, she wrote it in 3 symbols, where I would write it in 6, B-R-O-O-K-E. She did a symbol for the ber, a symbol for the and a symbol for the k. So that's how Chinese language is set up. But because there are so many different sounds, there are different characters. There's also old versions of Chinese where there are like old characters and there are new characters. Like we think about today, there are words in the English language that we don't use anymore. Same thing with Chinese. So there are characters that aren't used as much anymore, but there are still about 50,000 of them that exist, which is bananas. Actually, Japanese and Korean both use some Chinese characters in their writing systems. So they've kind of borrowed from Chinese when creating their own writing system and made it their own, which I think is really cool too, because you don't see that too terribly much anymore, where languages borrow from each other. So let's move away from languages and let's move into the compass. So the magnetic compass was invented and became extremely important to, you guessed it, navigation, and exploration. So we tend to talk about Europe quite a bit when we get into exploration, but China has a lot of its own exploration. It's not talked about as often. They traveled all over the world. They had their own kinds of pirates and things like that. That's really, really cool. There's a really cool history there that we just don't have time to get into. But exploration in China was also very big, just like it was in Europe. And this magnetic compass played a huge role in it. Now I have a picture here that I want to show you what that compass looks like. It's very different than the compass that you would think of, that little handheld compass, or maybe the compass you have on your phone. The magnetic compass looked like this. Oh, it's lost center. So it kind of looks like it has a spoon almost, and then it has the directions on it, and it would face north depending on where, or it was supposed to always face north like a compass does. And that's because it pulls towards the North Pole. And so that way that it was set up, I have no clue how it actually works. No clue how compasses actually work, really, except for knowing that they always point north towards the North Pole. If you want to learn more information, you can Google it. But this is what that compass looked like, which I thought was really cool. The last invention that we're going to talk about here today, before we move on, or before I kind of let you go off this video, is gunpowder. Gunpowder was actually invented in China in the 9th century. So if you have guns at home, or your parents have guns, or you've shot a gun before, You can think the ancient Chinese are the ones that developed gunpowder before it wasn't a thing. The way that gunpowder actually made it over to Europe was through the Silk Road. So it started in China and eventually made its way over. This eventually led to the development of fireworks, which is what your homework is going to be about tonight. Your homework tonight is a News ELA article on fireworks. It just briefly talks about China and fireworks, but then it talks about like how fireworks work. So kind of giving you a little bit different News ELA article than you're used to, but I think it's going to be really good. It'll be a good read for you. It's kind of interesting. So that's your homework tonight. Make sure you read through that on Google Classroom. It's the same way you did the one for Taoism and Confucianism, where the article is online on a Google Doc and the questions are in a Google form. Please make sure that you're using that Google Doc and using the article to help you on those questions. It will give you your score right away when you're done. If you have any questions, as normal, please reach out. If you have any questions, you can drop a comment in the Google on the today's checklist or on Google Classroom somewhere. But as always, good luck, guys.